Thank you for taking part in this online interview. As I see, there are still people who are joining us. So for those who are here, if you have any comments or urgent questions, please write them in the QA section and I will read them at the end if we have enough time. So first, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Anastasia Mutas. I'm manager of Management Development Center of European Business Association. And I'm so overwhelmed with emotions because despite the lockdown, the world became closer. And now we have the opportunity to talk with such a prominent and outstanding person who is #1 leading productivity guru and the author of the book and methodology Getting Things Done, David Allen. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Anastasia. Yes, delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm so happy to get acquainted with you digitally right now. So we are going to talk, of course, about GTD and how to apply it. But first, how did lockdown affect your business and your personal life?
Well, much of our business is supporting our partners and licensees around the world that we've certified to do coaching and training of the GTD, Getting Things Done methodology. And most of their businesses, you know, Slava in the Ukraine and Kiev, and have been based upon face-to-face, real-time training. So obviously those stopped. So, you know, so that's affected certainly revenues, and because much of our business is a royalty based, you know, from licensing our IP to all of these training companies to do that. At the same time, it sped up the necessity and our ability to do virtual training. We already had that in the works for a couple of years. So we knew that was the direction the world was going. The lockdown just put that on steroids. So that moved very, very fast. It's funny, I was talking to a guy a week or so ago, he was interviewing me, and he said, you know, last week, you know, like a week ago, whenever he was talking to me, his boss said absolutely nobody could work from home. And then in 2 days, everybody had to work from home. So, so again, it has certainly sped up that process. It hasn't affected my personal life that much, though, you know, I often do, well, every month or two, I usually do a keynote somewhere in the world, you know, live, and that certainly has stopped. What it has sped up for me is a whole lot of this kind of thing, virtual conversations. I'm doing 2 to 3 interviews and podcasts a week, just because the world says, okay, now we've got time and let's talk to David about how do we work in this changed world, which is, you know, many of your questions I'm sure will have to do with that. So, but otherwise, you know, I haven't worked in an office since 1981, way before you were born. So, you know, I live and work out of home and have a virtual office and have had a virtual professional life, you know, for many, many, many years. So it hasn't really affected that very much, you know, and Amsterdam is still pretty open. We go out for walks regularly. Luckily, we have a dog that gets us out to walk around the park regularly. And it's still a pretty active place. Some of the small businesses like the flower stands and the butcher and so forth have stayed open. So it hasn't really changed that much, though it's all kind of like an early Sunday morning all day long. You know, it's quiet. And there are no tourists, which actually, if you live here, that's actually fabulous. You know, go downtown and there's nobody there. And you know, that's, of course, that's not helping the economy at all. But so yeah, we're adjusting, sort of managing it fine.
Yeah, the same with us. We were working in offline, and now we are like transforming all our business or all our system to the digital world, and like adjusting to the new reality.
Yeah. Well, one of the worst things is I won't be able to get a haircut. I haven't had a haircut in a month, and maybe another month. So I said one of the worst things that could happen is in a month from now, I'm going to look like I did when I was in 1970 in Berkeley. You know, hair. You know. Either that, or my wife is going to attack me with our dog shearing scissors and stuff while I'm sleeping and cut it all off. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't mean to make too light of it, but as she says, laughter and soap are the cures for everything going on.
Mm. Yeah, I see. Okay, so during the quarantine, people are forced to stay and work at home, as we said, and for the majority, it is a challenge as there are a lot of distractors, for example, children. So as the result, people are complaining that they are unproductive. So what could you recommend to, in this case, and how to organize proper workflow at home, and what are your tips to overcome procrastination in this situation?
Yeah, well, I have several, and so I'm not sure how many of these tips people can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
But the first tip is have good communication with your family and say, you know, here's what I need, here's what you need. We need to work this out together. So
Mm-hmm.
you can't beat good, honest communication with each other. That's going to be critical no matter what. But some of the things that will help. First of all, if you're new to working at home, you need to make sure you've got a good home workspace set up individually for yourself. And it doesn't have to be big, but it needs to be solo. Don't share it with anybody because you need to be able to set up, as I call it, your cockpit. And then when you sit down there with your computer, maybe your in basket and whatever other tools that you need to, as I say, hit the road running, you sit
Mm-hmm.
down there, that automatically moves you into work mode. And then everybody around you should be recognized, wow, David's in work mode right now, you know, and only in an emergency should I interrupt him or let me send him a text or an email or a WhatsApp, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
he's in the digital world. And, you know, I don't know how easy that's going to be. You know, some people have even threatened to buy police tape, you know, the yellow tape, you know, do not cross this barrier, you know, and put
Do
it up
not
around,
disturb you.
you know,
Yeah.
do not disturb, put it up around their workspace.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that may be a little radical for most people, but I think that's an important thing, no matter what, is that you have a space that when you sit down in it, you automatically move yourself into work mode. And that will help a lot
Mm-hmm.
if you do that. So then when you get up and leave that space, then you're in personal space. You know, deal with family, deal with the kitchen and food and so forth. But when you come back and sit down in that space, you know, with your cup of coffee or tea or glass of wine or whatever it is that you work with, you know, then you sit down and you move into that modality. So I think that's really critical. And you need to make sure you've got all the right tools. I just read that the sale of small desks around the world has gone up tremendously, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm sure IKEA is appreciating the number of small desks they're probably delivering to people now, realizing that they need to work, you know, that they need to create a workspace from home. So you need a good filing system, you need a good in-basket system, you
Mm-hmm.
need obviously a place for your computer, you need a place that it's easy to get to tape, it's easy to get to your stapler, you know, you've got a place for, you know, all your pens and scissors, you know, that you need to have access to, you know, like right here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and your chargers, you know, for your mobile phone and your computer, all that needs to be set up. So if that's not, as I call it, on cruise control yet, if you haven't got that set up, that should be one of the most important projects that you should have right now, is get your home office set up so that you don't have to think about your office, you use it. So, and that's why I'd say very important not to share your space, because once you get your space set up, you want to be able to sit down and instantly start working. You know, if you're in the kitchen and you suddenly realize, wait a minute, there's an email I've got to send, you need to be able to walk right back into wherever your workspace is, sit down and hit the road running. If you're sharing that space with somebody else and they've left their stuff there, now now it's like frustrating you. So you need to, as I say, lower the barrier of entry to working wherever you are, even your virtual, you know, work life. So that's the way the world is going anyway. And you didn't ask this, but you know, a side question or a side comment here. I read not long ago that I'll forget what the numbers are, but by 2050 or something like that, in the US anyway, 50% of the workforce will be self-employed. So the direction the world is going in is for people to be able to manage themselves, manage their own businesses, and be virtual. So that's not a matter of whether, it's a matter of when that's going to happen.
And
So
event
this
happens now.
Yeah, this is throwing a lot of people into that situation if you haven't been there already. And you're going to need to get used to it. And it's a good thing to get used to it. It's nice to be able to then sort of, even when the world comes back to normal, if there is such a thing, that you have the ability to be highly effective and productive no matter where you are, even if you're traveling, even if you're at home, and to be able to have workspaces that you sit there and that's what happens when you're in that space.
Yeah, thanks. So the task number one is to set up your own office at your home, and this will lead to it will raise your productivity.
And
you know,
whatever has your attention with your family, you need to be real and communicate, as hard as that may be, or as uncomfortable as you might be doing that. Gee, dear, I need to make sure that I spend 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours doing the work I'm supposed to be doing. How can we cooperate here to make sure this works for both of us? And just, get some kind of rules of, not so much rules, but, get some standards about how you intend to work together. It's always a good idea.
Yeah, thank you. So next question is about motivation. Working in the organization means that you will not always be doing only that you want. Obviously, you must do things that can go against your wishes. So how to motivate yourself to start with unpleasant tasks and do not postpone them? So is it a matter of self-discipline or self-motivation?
Well, I don't like the word discipline. Discipline sounds like hard work. I like direction. I need to direct myself. See, you don't break a sweat by sitting down and having to staple a bunch of things. You might not like it, but sometimes it's really nice to have kind of dummy work to do, to let your brain rest. There are many times I love to just clean up my computer and do stuff that you might think, well, that's not a highly motivating stuff to do. But many times my brain needs a rest. And sometimes the best way to get it to rest is just to do dumb stuff that you might otherwise think is not motivating to do or not interesting. But if it's part of your job, now this kind of begs another question, which is, what is the stuff you don't like and why do you have it? If you're a fireman and you put out fires and you don't like it when the alarm bell rings, you made a wrong profession choice, right?
Yeah.
So what goes with the territory? Oh, come on, we all have to clean the toilets, we all have to wash dishes, we all have to take showers, we all have to deal with all kinds of stuff that may not be the most exciting things to do. So part of it is just grow up, just realize, oh, come on, that just kind of goes with the territory. Or change the territory. If you can, have somebody else do that work. Or ask yourself, why am I doing it? And what's the purpose of that work? It's hard to get motivated by stuff you don't know why you're doing it. So it's really nice to know, well, I'm doing this just because I got to do that. And if I don't do that, then I'll have a negative consequence. Well, that's not the most exciting motivation, but at least it's motivation. You realize to do that. Now, that sort of brings up another issue. I know a very successful guy in the US, written several books about energy and so forth. And he always says, look, take the ugliest thing you need to do and do it first. It's kind of like eat the frog or whatever that phrase is. It's like, you need to take that ugly email that you're just avoiding dealing with. Do it first. And then you can snack on surfing the web or social media the rest of your day as a reward. And yet I know another person, one of the most successful producers in Hollywood, and his prioritization is what's the most fun thing to do. And I do both. Sometimes I go, I need to get that ugly thing out of the way and just rest and relax and reward myself, for having done that. And sometimes I just go, let me just look at what's the most fun thing to do right now that's most of interest to me, because many times that gets my energy up. And then once my energy is up, then I say, okay, now I've got more energy. I'm ready to tackle stuff. I'm on a roll. So I would say, you know, again, this is part of I have a kind of a rule that goes like this. Rules are made when brains run out. In other words, you don't want to try to overstructure your life. I know you have a question that I've seen probably about, you know, structuring your day or daily to-do lists and so forth. And I like to stay as free as I can and just do what I feel like doing. Trust my intuitive intelligence on that. But that only comes after your ability to be able to manage all your commitments and make sure you have that inventory of all the things that you might, would, could, or should, ought to do. That needs to be easily viewable to you. Once you see that bigger game, then it's a little bit easier to be motivated to do. That's the one that will make the biggest difference if I can mark that off as done. Or that's the thing that would make the biggest difference if I got that put onto cruise control. So my attention is off of it again. So all of those things come into play for me on a daily basis, you know, just making those kinds of decisions. So you're not going to be able to create some sort of a formula or template that you can totally trust, aside from trusting your intuition. And that's just that still small voice inside of you. Well, come on, as soon as you get off this thing and you look around and say, well, gee, what do I do next? There's a part of you that probably knows. You just have to be able to be quiet enough and pay attention enough to that part of you that's probably coming from a little higher level, as opposed to, you know, I just want to eat or just want to, you know, goof off or whatever. Nothing wrong with those things either. But sometimes you just need to pay attention to the still small voice that's coming from a little higher perspective in terms of your life and what's important to you. Maybe that was a longer answer. Maybe that was a non-answer to what you asked. I don't know.
Yeah, it has like it depends, of course, on your intuition and on your wish, on your so I got a good, like, I liked your approach that sometimes you should start to do things that you think is funny, or that will bring you pleasure. So this is like about your, it's like a psychological work with yourself all the time. Yeah. But in time management, there are different approaches, like putting tasks and completing tasks effectively. And there is an approach of a 2-minute, like to have a task that can be done in 2 minutes. But how to understand and estimate that the process, the task will take only 2 minutes
Get
or
old,
more.
grow up, get some experience, and you find out which things take 2 minutes or not. You're only going to learn that. You know, when I first sort of uncovered or discovered that rule for myself, I bought a little sand timer, a 2-minute sand timer. I had to get it from a game company where you had 2 minutes to make some decision or make a move. So I found a 2-minute timer. And so I was able to then start to train myself. Okay, let me see how long it's going to take to respond to this email. And I turned the timer on and I watched. So it took me several months to kind of get a good sense of what 2 minutes was. But come on, sometimes it doesn't matter. If it's something you can finish really quickly, and that it really came as a pure efficiency factor. If you're going to do the thing at some point anyway, by the way, if you're not going to do it, throw it away. But if you are going to do it, then when are you going to do it? And it would take you, if it takes less than 2 minutes to do it, it would take you longer to organize it and review it later than it would be to finish it right then. And I know people say, well, gee, David, I would spend my whole day doing 2-minute stuff. No, you wouldn't. I don't have any 2-minute stuff. They're all done. You should not have a backlog of 2-minute actions. Those should already be decided and done. There is no backlog of 2-minute actions. They should already be done if you follow this principle. And, you know, and you'd be surprised how many strategic things have a 2-minute action, especially the more senior you are, you know, professionally. Many times when you sit down and think through, oh, wait, what's my next step here? oh, you know, I should have my assistant deal with that. Great. And it would take less than 2 minutes to shoot that email off right then. But it was still a big strategic thing. They just had avoided making the next action decision. So you have to then train yourself to be to build in next action thinking before you can actually really take advantage of the 2-minute rule.
Yeah. And usually when people like put when they are planning their days or weeks, they are putting deadlines. As a result, it leaves no room for the creativity. So does your method allow creativity, and what methods will you recommend to force self-brainstorming and idea generation?
Yeah, it's a good question. I actually came up with GTD because I love creativity and spontaneity. That's why I came up with it. Because if you don't do this process, it's going to keep you from having the freedom in your head to be really creative. So that's, you know, I plan as little as I can get by with. If I make external commitments, here's a meeting I need to be in, here's this, you know, broadcast that we're doing right now. Those things, you know, are commitments, what I call the hard landscape. So I manage those really, really well. And then I leave myself free to do whatever I feel like doing when I'm not doing something that's an external commitment that I might need to do. Now, external commitments can look like a lot of things. I might have a deadline, like I've got to submit this plan or I've got to submit this thing by Friday, and I don't have a lot of free time between now and then. I better just hunker down and do that. Now, I would challenge you to say that that actually in and of itself is a creative process. All of work is creative. Sitting down and writing a business plan, sitting down and crafting a good email that is getting you the result you want. Those are all highly creative events. But I know what you mean. It's all, I want to write poetry, or I want to play the flute, or I want to, God knows, you know, whatever else that you might want to do that you might consider more creative. And sometimes it's a really good idea to build creative space. You know, if I'm doing creative writing, I have a list called creative writing that I don't do when I'm sitting here in this office space that you see me in right now. I don't do that kind of writing here. I take my laptop and walk into my living room where I've got a nice easy chair. And when I sit down with my laptop there, that's much easier to move into sort of creative thinking mode. And sometimes it depends on, you know, and again, it depends on what you mean by being creative and doing creative stuff. Sometimes you might need to say, hey, let me take an hour and just come up with all the creative ideas and brainstorming I can about X, Y, and Z. So to the second part of your question, how would I recommend that you challenge or invite yourself to be more creative? It's like sit down and focus. You know, I think it was Picasso who said something like, inspiration is for amateurs. You're waiting to be inspired. You ain't going to get there, right? The muse, you know, just shows up whenever she decides to show up. And many times you'll get creative ideas when you're jogging or when you're doing other things. But for the most part, if you really want to be creative, especially if you want to write something creatively, that's called simple formula. Butt in chair, boot computer, hit key, right? Most of my creative stuff is only because after I started just sitting down and going, okay, let me just start to empty my head and get stuff out and write it, because I've learned most of my stuff simply by writing. Now that's me particularly, and maybe not everybody's wired that way, but you need to get engaged. If you want to be creative, don't wait for the inspiration to make you creative. You need to sit down and start doing whatever the creative activity is. You want to learn the flute? Buy one. You know, pick it up, start to blow sounds to it, you know, start to get going, you know, with all that. And a lot of people would love to be creative, but they're just not engaged. They're not willing to take the risk to be awful at something to begin with. But it's like writing, you know, all good writers will say the best way to write is write a crappy first draft. Right.
So in other words, you believe that all the people are creative and there are no people who are
Everybody's creating exactly what they've got right now. You know, you created how you're wearing your hair. You created a gorgeous thing you're wearing. You've created being on this computer with me. You're creating all the time. You can't stop. Anytime, anything you're focusing on is you're actually creating that, or you're adding creative energy to whatever that is. So everybody is creative. What most people mean, much like being productive, everybody is already productive. You're producing exactly what you got. What they usually mean is, I want to be more productive, which basically means I want to get more for the amount of energy I'm putting into it, or I want to get what I'm getting done with less energy that I put into it. So either one of those is an increase in productivity, right? But productivity is kind of like being creative. You're already creative. When people say, I want to be more creative, it's like, well, okay, more creative just means you want to spend more time doing the things you think are creative stuff. Start. You know?
Yeah, nice thoughts. Like to different approach to the creativity. Yeah.
Well, and also, take an action step. What's got your attention about being creative? I need to be more creatively thinking about the conference I need to organize for 2021, next year, once the pandemic is over. Great. Then what's your next action? If you were going to do that right now, if you're going to be creative about that, what would you need to do? Oh, I guess I should probably draft ideas. No kidding. And that's where, if you read Getting Things Done, when I talk about the natural planning model and I talk about mind mapping and brainstorming, it's very, creative stuff. But brainstorming usually will not happen unless you actually do something. Like go to a whiteboard with a marker, set up a conference room, there's probably nothing better that would get more creative about projects than actually set a meeting and have at least 2 or 3 people in the room. Then you feel really stupid if you don't come up with ideas.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just need to trick yourself into environments that then allow you to do the kinds of activities that generate those kinds of things. So if it were me, draft ideas, Ray, or draft ideas about X, Y, and Z is oftentimes something you'll see on my next action list. It'll be a very creative thing that shows up, but I have a very specific physical, visible action to take to trigger the creative process.
Okay, thank you so much. And also in your books, you argued against daily to-do lists. You said that they are unproductive and demotivational. So why do you think so? And how does GTD differ from the usual to-do list? And for those who don't know, please just clarify in some words what GTD is about.
Back many years ago, somebody did a study and they discovered that what most people had put on their Monday calendar to do, they didn't have time to do the whole week. Right? So most people, if they're trying to create a daily to-do list, they're usually way out beyond it. And this is, when I first got into this business, this is 35 years ago, even then the statistics were that 40% of your day is going to be a surprise. My guess is that's 80% now, after WhatsApp and texting and social media and all that. And so that's fine to come up with a daily to-do. Let's just be willing to tear it up in a second when you get better data. The problem is most people don't finish their daily to-do list and feel guilty at the end of the day.
Of course.
So, yeah, well, why? You just overplanned. You overstructured. Too control is out of control. Too controlled is out of control because it does not leave you with the flexibility to deal with new stuff that shows up that then requires you to recalibrate and refocus. Now, that said, I know a number of real GTD, practitioners who the night before go through all their lists, all their stuff, and they just take a small little piece of paper or a card and write the 3 things they're going to handle tomorrow if they have time. There's nothing wrong with that. You do that anyway. As soon as you make a choice about anything to do out of your systems, you're making a choice to do that instead of something else. So there's nothing wrong with having some sort of a focus and a structure that may help you do that. But again, when I first wrote the book and came up with that was a radical idea because most time management was about creating daily to-do lists. And I never found them working. I have a total life to-do list available all the time. And then I have the stuff that must get done. That's the hard landscape, or it won't get done, right? So once I know where the hard landscape is and then how much time I have, then I trust my intuitive judgments to look at all the other stuff and make good options and choices at that time. So, you don't need a daily to-do list. You need a total life to-do list. If you can't show me or yourself a total life to-do list right now, you're going to be driven by latest and loudest. And you're going to try to overstructure your life and then feel guilty.
Yeah.
Your choice if you want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There are a lot of followers of GTD methodology and who claim that GTD changed their lives, as well as haters. So, do you think that GTD can be used by everyone or only by those who have like special skills or special mindset or so on?
Well, it's useful for anybody that has a busy life that wants to be able to get it done with less effort and less stress.
I suppose
But
everybody has a busy life. Like
yeah, but not
our life is
everybody,
busy.
not every, I'll tell you the people most attracted to what Slava and I do. And that is the people who are already high performers and they know they could create more if they had more room to do it. And those are the people that are attracted to it. So it's kind of strange over the years, the people most attracted to what I do are the people who need it the least. They're already the most productive people. They already know the value of system. They already know the value of getting organized. They already know they're being able to produce value given where they put themselves, but they also know they're limited and they need more room to be able to do it better, to do it more, or do it with less stress or whatever. And those are the people who will take to it the most. It's good, it's useful for anybody. We're teaching kids 9 years old to do this. So it's useful for anybody that might want to get more done with less effort. And, and I'm not, when you say there are haters, I don't even know who those people would be. I mean, there are people that say, I don't need that. Well, fine. I'm not,
Yeah, perhaps.
I'm not willing to go beat somebody up and say they should do it if they don't want to do it. But my question is, hey, would you like more room in your head? And if they go, no, I go, fine, let me go find the next person because I got a lot of people that want more room. What you do with that space that this methodology creates is highly up to you. A lot of people use it to be more creative, be more strategic, be more innovative, be more loving and present with whatever it is you're doing. So if you've got enough of all of those things going on, fabulous. But you would probably be already attracted to this if you did.
Mm-hmm. But usually GTD is like known for the personal productivity, like a personal productivity methodology, but how can it be applied in terms of a team or a company and how to adapt this GTD to
Well,
your reality?
teams and companies get things done through people. So, building good personal self best practices is going to assist anything anybody's involved in their companies. And quite frankly, the principles of GTD personally also apply to any kind of an enterprise or a team. If I walked into your team or group or partnership right now, I'd say, what's got the team's attention right now? What's got the team's attention? And by the way, I could just walk into your family and say, what's got your family's attention right now?
Like everybody has an intention on different
Well, then
points.
why are you a team? You're only a team if you've got something that you've agreed that you should be doing together or producing or some purpose, right? And if that purpose is being fulfilled on cruise control, you're great. You're already there. Very few of them are, because there's a lot of complexity that goes on teams and agreeing who's doing what needs to be done when, et cetera. So I would just go into the team and say, what's got the team's attention right now? What's not on cruise control? We would identify that. That's the first thing I would do if I were coaching you personally. What's got your attention, right? What's on your mind? What's on the team's mind? Because there's an inverse relationship between on your mind and getting done. So all we need to do is find out, wait a minute, what's got their attention? That means that something is not on cruise control. There's some decisions about that haven't been made yet that need to be, or there's some organization or the results of that thinking that are not parked in the appropriate people or places at the right time. That's how you get appropriately engaged with anything so you can get it off your mind and under cruise control. So it's not, you don't have to go very far to see what is the enterprise, what's got its attention, what's got the team's attention. Oh, well, we need more staffing. Great. First of all, you need to know then, there's some other things that in an organization, you need to know who owns what the team is about. Because if the team has to have somebody that decides whether the team is okay or not, or whether it needs to have something done. And you may be, what's got your attention, and then you clarify that. Step 2, what's the outcome? What are the actions you might need to take as a team? Great. Step 3, organize. Who's doing that? Where are you keeping track of the projects the team has? How often do we need to then reflect and review? Step 4, all that stuff the team's got attention on. Step 5 is, okay, are we all comfortable about who's got the next actions, and the needle is moving appropriately for what the team is all about. Those are the 5 steps: capture, clarify, organize, reflect, and engage. That's exactly what the team is. The little bit of a difference is that for the most part, assuming you have a fairly sophisticated team, that the next actions should be the individual's decisions that they walk out of there once they've got an agreement about some sort of a project or some outcome that they've committed to the team to do. Then they have to figure out what their next action is. So if you have people that get GTD on a team, that team cooks. But as soon as you have people that don't do this personally, then you have to have extra meetings. You have to figure out, wait a minute, the ball got dropped. Wait a minute, there's stuff falling through the cracks here. We need more emails that create worse meetings, that create worse emails, that create worse meetings. So if you don't have individual professionalism in terms of these best practice behaviors, you're going to have too many meetings and crappy emails flying back and forth, trying to get clarity about something. And a lot of teams want to do team building because 1 or 2 people are screwing up on the team and they think that'll fix it. But the people who are screwing up don't think they're screwing up. So, sorry that you ask, but that's believe me, after 35 years of consulting and training and thousands of people in those situations, that's a pretty universal issue. So it is, yes, it primarily was developed out of a self-management system, but then the value of highly productive self-managed people goes infinitely, especially the more senior and influential they are. So, you know, it's a lot of senior people sort of in the organization don't think they need this, but I got a lot of senior people that would tell you, oh my God, that person is just infantile. Because if you don't think there's an increase in your ability to be able to use your time better, to manage your people better and get more results with less effort, you know, grow up. You know, so there's kind of hard news there for anybody. But and frankly, getting things done is nothing but good business. It's just, hey, productivity is about what are you trying to produce, and then how do you allocate resources, you know, to make it happen. Outcome and action. So outcome and action thinking is the core thought process that getting things done embodies. So when you have a team that's focused on outcomes, you don't start meetings without going, what do we want to accomplish by what time today? If you don't have that clarity in a meeting, I wouldn't even go. You'll have people spinning all over the place and then have to have another meeting. Right? That's not going to work. And if you're writing emails that are not clear about what you're asking, and you're CCing 65 people that don't need to know what the heck this stuff is, you're just spewing stuff in there to cover your ass. Sorry. You know,
yeah, that's okay. Thank you.
I'll be 75 this year, so I'm getting kind of old and cranky. So, you know, be careful.
Yeah, the last question from the main part of this interview. So a lot of big, it is like connected with the previous one, but still, a lot of big enterprises usually have their corporate training programs or even universities for staff development. So how can GTD be useful to them? And does your company have experience of successful collaboration with such corporations?
Well, we've had a lot of such things. You know, big client General Mills out of the United States. You know, years ago, we spent much time with them, coordinating with their internal university and their learning, you know, chief learning officer. It depends on whether the company has a kind of a not invented here allergy. See, a lot of companies say, wait a minute, we know what we need to do. And we don't need somebody from the outside to come in and tell us what to do because we know what to do. And that's fine, as long as they know what to do. So we just, you know, usually it's because some senior person, and usually something, either a line senior executive or somebody in the learning and development field in a company, runs across getting things done, and they go, oh my God, this is actually what we need. This handles stress management, time management, prioritization, productivity, and all those boxes that they need to try to check off if they have those kinds of requirements. And if you really start to experience what getting things done is, it solves all of those, or at least gives you the best practices for that. So it depends on, quite frankly, how sophisticated they are, how open they are to, you know, using outside resources to help them do something they may not be able to do themselves.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I suppose this is the end with our main part, and let's move to the questions from the participants. We received a large number of them. I hope to cover all the majority. So I see there is a question, the last question in the chat. So what are the common errors in application GTD, like mistakes maybe or something?
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
you could fall off any one of the 5 steps of how do you get stuff under control and focused. So one big problem is people don't capture everything. So they've still got stuff banging around in their head. So they don't trust their list and they don't trust their head. If you don't get it all out, which one are you going to trust? And most people don't trust either one. And then they feel like, well, this is not giving me the clarity that I thought I was supposed to get. So then they give it up. So that's the first thing, is people may fall off the capture step. And even if they've captured everything, if they're avoiding making next action and outcome decisions, clarifying real specific next actions, then their lists still become kind of daunting because they're looking at stuff that needs more thinking and more decision making. And they're already, overwhelmed. And so they say, I don't have time to think and decide, stop reminding me. And so they find their list are creating as much stress as they relieve. So that's, failure 2, is you fall off step 2. You don't make those clarification decisions so that you trust the contents. Step 3 is, even if you made next action decision, if you didn't put it somewhere that you trust you'll see at the right time and context, you won't trust your system. So having a system you actually don't trust will then cause people to say, well, managing a system is too much trouble, because again, it's not giving you the payoff. So that's, failure number 3, is you don't have a really trusted system that's current and complete. Step number 4, you've got a system, but you don't look at it, right? You're not reviewing and reflecting on all the contents of all of your commitments at the multiple horizons.
You may forget about
And if you're not doing a weekly review, listen, any of you GTD folks out there, the biggest habit you need to build is the weekly review. So, and it's one of the toughest ones to build in. Once a week, you need to get everything, catch up and get everything complete and current, get your system up to date. And that's quite challenging for a lot of people to take the time to actually do that. And so that they'll fall off the wagon pretty fast as soon as your system gets incomplete. So step 4, people fall off that one. They're not reviewing and reflecting on the contents and keeping the stuff alive and well. So you need to use your mind to keep your mind empty. You have to be looking at all your stuff and saying they'll wait before your mind is clear, right? But you need to be able to see all of that at one time or very quickly. So that the review and reflection process is one that people often fall off. And then the last one is you didn't do steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so you're driven by latest and loudest in terms of how you engage, as opposed to intuitive intelligence in terms of making choices out of all your options. So you could fall off anywhere along the line, and people do.
And for capturing information, do you personally use paper, like notebooks or some applications?
Yeah, for capture, for the most part, my stuff is low tech. Sitting here where I'm at my desk, I can't tell you how many of these pads, because as we're talking, I suddenly think, lightning strikes here. I got to write that down. So this is always on a flat surface right in front of me. Obviously, many good ideas happen where I can't implement that idea. That's why this is with me all the time. With a pen and a little notepad. And low tech is faster, it's easier, there's no batteries, no Wi-Fi required, it's a lot easier to be ubiquitous. It's possible I can use my iPhone every once in a while. I've got a good app on there that I can capture voice or picture stuff that then throws it into my email, so it's not lost. But frankly, I have to turn it on and click too long. But see, this is not my organization system, it's my capture system. Yeah. Once these are captured, then those go into my in tray, which is right here. Those notes go there. If I don't, clarify and organize them or do them right then, they go into there, and then that gets clarified and organized into my system, which is primarily digital in terms of my lists. So capture usually, low tech is faster, better, easier. See, a lot of people confuse capture with organize. I throw away 80% of the notes I write. I just don't know what 80% those are while I'm writing them. I have to figure that out later on. I have a lot of bad ideas. I don't think they're bad when I'm having the idea, but later on I go, come on, stupid idea, David. But the 20% that are really cool, I don't miss a thing. And that's how I've created most of my life, is those 10 or 20% that were actually wound up being very cool stuff, that some raw data about it was captured kind of when I was on the run.
Yeah, thanks. There is another question. You have a great stack of books behind you. Are you a quick reader, and do you have any tricks applied to how to perceive books faster?
No, I'm not a quick reader. And all of these books I just have stacked there because we had no other place to put them. They're all my books translated in all the different languages. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to read Getting Things Done in Chinese. I am not going to read Getting Things Done in Italian or Russian or wherever. These, my wife just said, let's not throw these away. We just need one copy of all of these just for archive purposes. And it looks good on a podcast. So, whatever. I am not a real quick reader. I like to kind of enjoy and take my time when I'm reading, particularly a good book. And I don't read a lot. Usually there's one book in motion, as I do that. So I'm not a big reader and not a particularly fast reader. Years ago, I did a bunch of speed reading training, have had a good bit of training about kind of how to see larger spaces and to do that. But a lot of that's just too much work, takes too much practice. I'd rather just sit back and kind of relish what I'm reading and enjoy it.
Do you think that reading quickly is an important habit in nowadays?
I think so. It's like typing quickly is too, right? And if you're not doing either one of those, see, the brain moves much faster than people read. That's why you get so distracted when you read. That's why the faster speed readers actually understand more about what they're reading, because it keeps the brain very much engaged, and it sort of keeps up with the speed that the brain processes information and doesn't allow the brain to then get distracted and to go other places. So a good friend of mine, Mark Tickler, here in Amsterdam, has also done a lot of research in that area too. And he suggests, for instance, having kind of music or some other input while you're reading actually keeps your mind focused on what you're reading, more than if you didn't have any other kind of an input. So interesting, brain stuff that they've been figuring out about that. But again, I haven't really had the need to do that much reading that fast. I know a lot of people who do, and then it's probably worthwhile, experiencing that. So, are doing something about that.
There is one funny question. Is your GTD method useful for earning the first million?
It's
So do you know the examples? So when people applied GTD in their lives and earned their millions?
I don't know. I don't look at people's bank accounts, and I don't, I don't see that much intimate detail about it. I'm sure most everybody that would tell you they were able to make more money, or they were able to make money in a much more relaxing and enjoyable way. They used it to be able to create their own businesses that they wanted to do for a long time, and so forth. So I think it helps anybody who wants to be able to produce a result. But I would say making $1 million, being happier, being able to be more present with whatever you're doing, being able to have time to watch your girl play football as opposed to being on your iPhone. A lot of people would say that's worth more than $1 million. So it kind of depends on what sort of outcome you're after, but I'm sure they are out there. I just don't keep track of what people do with it.
Okay, and what motivates you personally during these crisis times? Do you have any sources of motivation?
What I'm doing right now. Probably much of what you and I have been talking about has been potentially useful for a number of people. I've just been producing more than 20 2-minute tips for turbulent times that you'll be able to see on a YouTube channel that we have. We haven't published it yet or made it public, but we will in a day or two. So there's a lot of, if you just go to the GTD channel on YouTube, you see a lot of things, recording over all these years. That's fun to do. I mean, I like nothing more than to be able to then help people improve their conditions, whatever that is. So I'm probably more of an educator than an entrepreneur, myself. I'm more a researcher. I figured this stuff out. Hopefully we've been trying to find, really cool ways to be able to help people understand this and to have it stick. That's not my area of expertise. I'm not an instructional designer. I'm not even a real good trainer. I'm a pretty good presenter, but I don't have the patience to hang out with people and train them, so much. So my thing was to produce the model, and then people can then take advantage of it however they want. And I've got a whole lot of people around me now that are much better than me at being able to actually do the training and understand how to design training materials and training formats that work really well. And we've run across in the last 10 years now some of the best instructional designers in the world that have helped us build the products that Slava and other people, our other licensees around the world now have access to. So that's inspiring to see that going on. But again, I'm not so much doing that as I'm kind of just watching it and seeing how this is spreading, which is great. And again, I can't stop talking about this stuff. It's some of the best things that anybody needs to know in their life. And if, even 35 years ago, when I began to formulate this, was like, well, if I only had a day with somebody, what would I want them to know that I'd found out? I'd want them to know about completion and creativity. So that how powerful and how important it is to create the things that you've put into motion and be accountable for those. And then how critical it is that you then focus your attention in a creative way to create, more positive results for yourself. So creativity and completion are really the two ultimate essence of what getting things done is about. That's where it came from, still is. So anybody, anybody that can use any of that information, it's going to improve their lives. And not only that, it will improve every connection you have in your life. Every intersection you have in your life is kind of going to move up the food chain a little bit. The more you do this, the more you're focused on outcomes and actions, you're managing yourself, the clearer your head is as you're doing anything is going to affect everybody around you. You're going to build trust. People are going to like being around you. You're not going to rub them the wrong way. They're going to be able to say, wow, this person gets things done. Or this person, God, I really appreciate your clarity. How did you do that? And the funny thing is, I don't know how funny it is, but the interesting thing is you don't have to go implement all of this to improve your condition. If you just wrote a few more things down than you're currently doing, you'll feel better. You'll be more relaxed. If you just keep a pen and paper by your bed, you'll sleep better. So, as we say, this is not like running with scissors. There's nothing dangerous about any of this. It's really just a good thinking practice but you're not born doing it. A lot of people sort of do a lot of these things kind of intuitively, and they just sort of built in some of these practices, but a lot of them are not aware of what the practice was and why it works and why people around them don't do it. So because I haven't talked about anything, and getting things done is not about any behaviors people aren't already doing. Duh, everybody knows how to write something down. Everybody knows how to make a next action decision. Everybody knows how to make a list. Everybody knows how to look at a list and make a choice about what to do off the list. Duh. But
easy steps, but sometimes we skip them. And yeah, I agree that perhaps the more mess you have in your head, in your mind, the more mess will surround you in life. So like the best thing is just to clear up your mind and to it's the way for productivity. And
that's how I make my priority decisions. People often ask me, how do I do that? And I say, well, what's most got my attention right now? What do I need to do to get it off my mind? Because my priority is clear space. I love clear space. I love the ability to just be here, not have anything pop into my mind except talking to you. There's a lot of stuff that could, believe me. You want to see my list? But I looked at it and said, no, you're it right now. Maybe I made a mistake. I don't know. I'll find out later.
Yeah, the life will show. So do you see any differences in the implementation of GTD in different countries and different cultures?
No.
So it doesn't depend what the country, the culture, it works equally.
It's universal. It's human stuff. So believe me, we're doing this work in China and Brazil and Canada, and for kids and for CEOs and for nurses and for, bankers and for everybody in all these different countries. So the common denominator really is people, I think, that want to make sure their life keeps improving in some way. And that's true for pretty much any culture. But there's probably more difference between you and your cousin and your next door neighbor than you and me in terms of the implementation of this. It's a global thing. That's one of the coolest things about it. Is one of the reasons I also moved to Amsterdam instead of California and Santa Barbara where we were. This is much more the center of the world than California was. I love California too. So it's not that I didn't like California or Santa Barbara, but it's so nice to be doing work that anything we do is now, especially as virtual as things are becoming, it's a global world. I know Kiev is not far from Amsterdam, but heck, we're still like next door. So that's great. So that's part of what all my motivation is, and I have not seen any difference. That's why it's really nice to be able to do work that I don't have to change what I say or what the methodology is. Different cultures probably have a little bit of a different spin that they might take to it. Some of the Oriental cultures pay a lot more attention to the gurus. Some of the Scandinavian countries don't want an American guru because they just feel like they're much more independent and don't need that. Who's that blonde-haired guy? Get him with good teeth. Get him out of here. We don't need that. So I think that's more stylistic than anything having to do with the methodology.
Okay, so let's move to the next question. What is your attitude towards latest neuro everything? Neuro management, neuro leadership, neuro marketing?
Well, the EU, I love the EU. I love being here. I love being in the Netherlands. We love it right now. I mean, I'd much rather be here than the US in terms of what's going on. And, I have to say it, Angela Merkel is my wife's and my hero in terms of what she's been able to do and how she was able to pull things together and the guts she's had to do what she's done. None of it's easy. I'm glad I'm really glad it's not my job to try to figure that one out. But I love the freedom to be able to go back and forth, and have this kind of the United States of Europe, if you will. But it's a global world. And, I think everything, I'm a history major. So, historically, everything goes through cycles. And we're obviously in a retrench, close the borders. We don't like immigration, let's be nationalistic. And that's, part of the cycle that's going on right now.
Yeah, but David, my question was about neuroscience. So there are very popular different approaches, neuro leadership. It's all that is all connected with brain, with mind.
Oh, neuro. I thought you were saying euro.
Yeah, sorry. Neuro management, neuro leadership, neuro marketing, and so on. So what's your attitude towards this?
I don't have much of an attitude about that. I mean, the neurology, they're still just discovering a little bit about the brain and how all that works. So the neural, I just finished reading a great book, by the way. It's called Strategic Aging by Daniel Levitin, and he's a cognitive scientist who's written a lot about the research that's gone on in terms of, in a way, how much better we get as we get older cognitively. So that's kind of interesting stuff. But otherwise, I'm not a scientist in that regard. And kind of, what do you mean by neuro? I mean, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is like 40 years old. It's been out there for a long time. So just kind of like, how do we think? And so they're still just barely beginning the research of how we think, what affects how we think, and so forth. I just know that given the work that I've done, I discovered 35 years ago that your brain's for having ideas, not for holding them. Now the brain scientists in the last 10 or 15 years have just validated that. They've now proven that if you're trying to keep more than 4 things in your head, and that's the only place you're keeping track of them, that you'll start to diminish your cognitive process. So the brain scientists have now just validated the whole idea that, yeah, getting your head empty and keeping the stuff out of there is absolutely critical for managing your life well. I was interviewing Daniel Levitin, the guy who wrote Successful Aging, and as a cognitive scientist, and I told him, I said, I've seen the research that more than 4 things, you're going to diminish your cognitive process. He said, wrong. I said, what do you mean wrong? He said, 2. So from his experience, 2 things is about it. If you try to manage more than that and just in your head, he said, it just doesn't work. And they now know that now. So it was always the neurology stuff. What was interesting to me was just how much it validated these best practices that GTD represents.
Okay, and next question. So what things should not be done by a leader during the quarantine? during the lockdown
What
should not
they
be done?
not be doing? I don't know. Expecting people to be doing stuff that they can't do in the lockdown. So I don't know. It's manage expectations. So one of the things you should probably not do is assume that this is not going to change how the workforce works.
Mhm.
And, to try to maintain status quo when the status quo has been blown to bits, with all that. So, what should they not do? Well, anything any leader should not do, which is, don't be an ineffective leader. If you're out of control and unfocused, nobody wants to follow you anyway.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So which is the most used system, OneNote or Excel for GTD implementation, or you could advise some app?
Yes.
Would you advise some app?
Yes, any app, anything that's a list manager. I refuse to say anything's better than the other because some people like OneNote, some people like Excel, some people like OmniFocus, some people like Outlook, some people like whatever you're going to use is the best thing to use. All you need is a list manager for the most part. And there were at last count, there were over 300 apps that have been built out there, that say they support the GTD process, but basically they're just list managers with different kind of bells and whistles. So a lot of it depends, what are you currently using you're already comfortable with? If you were trying to implement GTD to begin with, I wouldn't try to learn software at the same time. That's too much to try to do all at one time. So find whatever it is you like list manager. I know a lot of people that use Excel. That's a great list manager. You could just use Word, just make lists in Word if you wanted to keep it done digitally. And a lot of people are going back to paper-based planners. They're probably no better list manager than that. No clicks required, no batteries required, no Wi-Fi, and they're more in your face and more available to you than oftentimes your digital list. Because the problem with the computer is out of sight, out of mind. And they're not really out of mind, but out of sight, out of conscious reflection on what the contents are. So to use your computer lists, whatever app it is, you have to have the rigor to consistently look at the contents and keep them current like you do with any system. But that's sometimes more challenging in the digital environment.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Next question: how to keep personal relationships with colleagues and customers during the quarantine?
Communicate.
All the time?
Well, communicate
24/7?
No, just communicate when it's appropriate. Probably most people I know probably should catch up on thank you notes. I haven't checked in with you for a long time. I want to give you an update about what's going on with us, et cetera. How are you? How are you dealing with all this? So a lot of it has to do with that. And a lot of that has to do with your personality style, about whether you get energy by, communicating with people, or whether it's something you have to work at. So I'm more of an introverted kind of person. So I actually have to work at it. Not work hard, but it's like I need to kind of focus on it. Oh yeah, there's some people I should respond back to, or there's somebody that's on my mind I should probably talk to, right now. So just plain old common sense human stuff. But you can't beat the communication. I think communication, especially now, and when you have tools like Skype and Zoom and stuff like that, hey, no reason not to be able to, utilize that however you might want to do it.
But sometimes maybe it can distract your colleague if you are calling too much. Yes, during the day.
Don't call.
Okay, just write the email.
Just text or email. I mean, that's why texting and instant messaging and so forth has a lot of advantages, because you're not interrupting people in terms of their flow and forcing them to have to stop what they're doing and then engage with whatever that is. Sometimes talking to them is perfect, but then send them a text and say, hey, can we chat? Sure. Give me a call. Yeah.
So if you could please share an approach to deal with a significant amount of incoming emails.
Sure.
How to deal with emails? Maybe how to categorize them, or like prioritize.
It's the same way you deal with anything. It's just you get a lot more volume, of that stuff, but you still have to make decisions about what it is. So a very quick way, if you get a whole lot of stuff, What you don't want to do is just keep having this stuff pile up in your in basket in your email. You need to make some decisions about what does this stuff mean. So first of all, you need to delete a lot of stuff. A lot of people are just keeping stuff in there that they should have deleted to begin with. So there's a key on your computer in English anyway, DEL. I don't know what it is in Russian or whatever you have, but get used to it. So get stuff out of there you don't need. Also, you need to make sure you have a very quick, very easy filing system for email that has no action on it, but you need to keep it. So if you looked at my computer right now, you'd see at least 200, 250 file folders in my navigator bar of just stuff that I've got by topic, by people, whatever. And I just drag stuff over there. I don't even nest things inside of there. I just have one alpha system, based on theme, topic, or whatever. And so, if you delete what you need to delete, file what you need to file, but you're going to reduce a lot of that volume. But you have to decide, is this something to delete? Is this something to file? Because those things don't tell you that. You actually have to read them and figure that out, right? And then handle the 2-minute stuff. Anything that's left that you can actually do in 2 minutes or less. And then if you're in a high email environment, we've sort of estimated that probably 30 to 40% of your actionable emails you could actually turn around in less than 2 minutes, assuming you know how to type, right? So if you delete, file, and handle the 2-minute stuff, you've only got 2 kind of emails that'll be left. Emails that are going to take you longer than 2 minutes to engage with, however you decide to do that, and emails that may represent something you're waiting on to come back from somebody else. And so what you can do quickly is create 2 folders in your navigator bar, one called action and one called waiting for, but put some prefix on them. If you're in an Outlook environment, for instance, the @ sign, or sometimes a hyphen or something in the front of it, so it throws it to the top of your alpha sort of your file, of your navigator folders, but looks different than your reference files, right? Then you drag all the emails that are going to take you longer than 2 minutes to deal with over into the action folder, and drag all the things that represent stuff you're waiting for in the waiting for folder. Guess what's left in your email? Nothing. Not in your in basket anyway. Doesn't mean you're all done, but it does mean that then the things that you still might need to do are sitting in your action folder. And that's a much smaller thing that you have to assess. The biggest problem, though, is that most people have never seen an empty in basket in their email. And if you actually experience that, you get so excited. You just want to go party hardy and drink and never open the action folder. So you have to be careful about that. But that is a very quick way to manage all that volume. And should you be getting all those emails? There's another question to ask yourself. Why am I getting this? And if you don't need it, stop it. If you do, it's part of your job. And some people, half your day is dealing with email because that's your job. That's your work. That's a lot of what my work is now. It's just dealing with stuff virtually and email and correspondence. So, but, I get my in basket emptied every 24 to 48 hours, so I don't have a backlog.
Yeah, thank you for the advice. I suppose I will try to deal with my emails using your advice.
Well, what are your options?
Once again?
Anybody got a better option than what I just said? I don't think so. Or you could just let, I think it's so funny. Do you only throw out part of your garbage, the parts that really stink? Or you throw all of it out? So why people only have a half a system? You either just shut off emails, so you don't get any of it, or deal with it like you deal with your mailbox and your garbage. You don't let those things mount up in there. You deal with them. I understand you've got a lot more volume, and content in there, but it's still the same principle.
Yeah, to some extent, perhaps.
Now,
Yeah.
if you have a huge backlog, and believe me, we've run across 30 and 40,000 emails before working with clients. If you have a huge backlog and you still want to try to tackle it in some way, the best thing to do then is to, first of all, sort by the sender, because then you can delete 20 at a time from that person, because they're not even in the company anymore. Why are you even, you don't need their email, dump it. And then sort by date. And another thing you can do is then you can just build folders called, you know, April 2020, and all your April emails drag over there, or March 2020, or February, or whatever, back to whenever you think you've got stuff, and then just chip away at those things in terms of cleaning those files up. But that'll give you at least a head start in feeling like, okay, let me get my email unconstipated. So there are some of those kind of tricks. They're certainly not a permanent solution, but yeah, that might help.
Yeah, thanks. Let's move to another question from Olga. It would be great if you could reflect on your personal experience when you had the biggest struggles with getting things done, maybe in early years of your career, and how you eventually managed to beat them.
I didn't have any problem with getting things done. As soon as I started to find it out, my life was already pretty well organized. But I had a mentor who taught me how to empty everything out of my head and make next action decisions. And I haven't stopped since, because I saw how instantly that made such a huge difference for what I was doing. And I was also starting my own consulting practice then too, and was using these techniques with all of my clients. And you feel a little embarrassed if you are trying to teach something you don't actually do. So, you know, I kept myself on board for the last 35 years. And I fall off, come on regularly. We all do, you know, because anytime you build something new or anything changes, you're going to have to disrupt your old system and then recalibrate and refocus. I just know how to do that fast. So sorry, I don't have a better answer than that. That's the truth.
Thanks. How not to panic in critical situations, and what are your secrets of calming yourself down and empowering for next steps?
Well, you can't beat the mindfulness stuff. Focus on your breathing. You know, I learned that in the martial arts when I got a black belt in my 20s. You know, is that focusing on your breathing brings you present. And when you're present, panic only comes from regret of the past or fear of the future. You know, if you could be totally present, that's why the yogis in India, whatever, can, you know, put nails to themselves and walk on fire and all that stuff, because they're just so present. They just experience that as sensation. Pain and panic only come from your emotional responses based upon that stuff. I'm not saying this is easy, right? But that's the first thing I would do if I were starting to panic, because I would breathe, I would try to come present, and then ask yourself, what are you most afraid of? You know, one of the best things to do, part of my advice for a lot of people right now in the pandemic and with all the stuff that's going on, is you need to do a worst case scenario. You need to sit down and say, given what's going on as best I know it, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I don't mean dwelling on negative thoughts or being in some sort of a, hanging out in negative stinking thinking, as we say. But you do need to then be able to look at it in the face and say, I could deal with that. Might not be fun, might not be easy, but it's something I could do. The reason is, if you don't do that, subliminally, that fear is running anyway. And so what you have to do is, I need to look at it and say, I can get through it. The way out is through, not trying to ignore it, not trying to go numb about it, but whatever. You need to look at that and say, could we deal with the worst case? That's one of the first things that we did. My wife and I, you know, as soon as the pandemic hit and we realized, you know, a whole lot of our income was just going to get smashed, simply because it comes from the trainings that, you know, our guys around the world are doing. Then we said, okay, and I just brought up this Excel spreadsheet and called it worst case. And we actually ran the numbers and we said, okay, we could live, you know, we'll survive, you know, no matter what. And so that's then relieved essentially the pressure off of that. So there's no panic. So you need to really ask yourself, if you're in panic mode, why? What's the fear? You know, can you deal with that? And then, you know, come out on the other side. And then you also want to say, well, what would wild success look like? How would I like to feel? If things could be as cool as they could be, what would be the best case? So, you know, and I've done this in my business consulting for 35 years. Best case, worst case, expected case. Those are always great things to ask yourself and scenarios to go through, so that you don't want to dwell on the negative, on the worst case, but you want to make sure that you can handle it, which then frees you up to be doing much more productive and effective thinking, you know, in the directions you want to go in.
Yeah, thanks. And Do you know about these like mindfulness practices, which are very popular, for example, in Google and Facebook, in big corporations, and a lot of employees of these corporations use these practices. So do you think are they helpful? Are they effective?
Sure. You need
Yeah.
that. So like exercise, good nutrition, good relationships, all those things are helpful. So a lot of mindfulness stuff is just, stuff I've done for the martial arts for years. So that's nothing really new in that way. So yeah, no,
Well,
it's
it's
all
like
great.
becoming very popular right now because
Yeah, great.
like,
That's
we
fine.
understood
But
that this.
I don't care how you focus on your breathing. If you still need pet food or cat food, you're sitting down to try to meditate, cat food pops into your head.
Mhm.
Why don't you appropriately engage? See, if I need cat food pops into your head more than once, you're inappropriately engaged with your cat. I don't care how much you focus on your breathing or not.
Mhm.
So a lot of what GTD is about is clear up your head. Meditating or drinking will get you out of your head, for different reasons. Meditation, you can sort of allow yourself to lift up above the whole game. Drinking just kind of numbs out the stuff that's banging around in there. But neither one of those gets rid of the cat food issue. You need to appropriately engage with your commitment about your cat. So that's why, when I sit down to meditate, I have pen and paper very close by, because many times when I try to relax, these things start to bubble up and surface from who knows where that I want to capture, get out of my head, so I can have a much cleaner, mindfulness.
Yeah, thanks. What was the biggest waste of your time? Did you waste your time?
I've never really thought about wasting time so much. Usually, I suppose if you said, wasting time, did I spend too much time playing Go on my computer or Words with Friends or something that I could have been doing other stuff? Yeah, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But, quite frankly, like, no, I enjoyed doing those. They just gave my brain a rest. And sometimes it was just the fun thing to do. So a lot of times what people think is wasting time is not. Because if I look back on my 75 years, a whole lot of where you might say I wasted my time was just a way of spending time doing stuff I wanted to do that then gave me the freedom to have better thoughts about what I really wanted to do. So I don't dwell much on wasted time stuff. I do a lot of things. People say, "Wow, you look like you're relaxed. You're hanging out. And
Mm-hmm.
but so usually I just keep myself engaged in some way." And even thinking about nothing is a fun exercise to do.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks. So there is also the question, dear David, it would be great if you name your top 5 inspirational books and movies, or just your favorites. Do you have something like
Um,
inspirational
yeah,
that
well, as I
inspires
said,
you?
I just finished Strategic Aging or Successful Aging by Daniel Levitin. It may have a different title. I think they titled it differently in the UK, so you'd have to look it up. But it's a fabulous book if you're over 50, engage with somebody over 50, or think you may live over 50. It's a
Mhm.
fabulous book with all kinds of great information about, ways to optimize, your body, your mind, your thinking, your stuff. So that was inspiring to me, very much so. Another book called The Antidote by a guy named Oliver Burkeman, Burkeman, very inspiring book, The Antidote. The subtitle is Happiness for People Who Can't Stand Positive Thinking.
Mhm.
And it's as funny as that is, it's actually very well written. And my wife would laugh out loud as she was reading it. He's a great writer. He's a Brit. He's also a GTDer, by the way. And he actually goes into something I didn't know that much about, which were the Stoics, back in Greece. And the Stoics, everybody thinks of them as being this hard-nosed kind of ascetic stuff, but the Stoics were really much more into acceptance of current reality.
Mhm.
And so as opposed to, everything is fine, total optimism, don't have any negative thinking. No, you need to have whatever negative thinking shows up out there and don't try to resist it. So much of what I've been talking about and much of what getting things done is about is accepting your current reality. That's why a
Mhm.
lot of people resist it. They go, oh my God, you mean I have to think about all the stuff I've committed to? Yeah. Yeah. And people get mad at me for their list. I go, sorry, ain't my list. That's yours. you know, so sort of an acceptance and acknowledgement of current reality. So The Antidote, fabulous book, fun read. Breaking Rank, a friend of mine now, I met him because we shared the stage at TEDx in Curacao. I was looking to see if I had it. Oh, Successful Aging. There's Daniel's book.
Yeah.
And Breaking Rank, another wonderful book by Stephen Coutinho. He's from Curacao in Suriname, and a banker, very successful banker, and he wrote about why the third world activities, why they are suffering under the paradigm of colonialism that put on top of them and that they bought into, that we are less than the white people who then ran us over, and how much difference that makes. And it started to explain a lot about what you see in the news about things going on in these, quote, third world countries that seems to make no sense. And Stephen's book is fabulous, called Breaking Rank. It's another really good one. And Brave New Work. Just interviewed with Aaron. This is a lot about self-organizing organizations now, and the whole idea, because we implement holacracy, a sort of self-organizing, you know, model. And this is a lot about kind of where work is going, and especially in the virtual world that we're in right now. You know, this is going to be that much more important. So Brave New Work, Aaron Dignan is that book. And, you know, even before that, Tony Crabb's book, Tony's a good friend, big GTDer, Busy, you know, thrive in a world of too much busy, right? And Tony's got a lot about how to make sure that you relax, make sure you're taking care of yourself, and get a bunch of, anyway, that should be enough.
Yeah, thank you so for your recommendations. So we have like 5-7 minutes. If someone has a question, please write it in the QA section. I have like the last questions in my list from the participants. So do you have any life credo, life motto, or something?
Let go, let God. That's kind of my screen. You know, let go. You know, because control is the master human addiction, trying to control things, and, you know, trying to make life change, being different, and trying to grab hold of it and control it. And, you know, I sometimes find myself trying to do that as well. And I just need to remind myself, let go, David, come on, relax. There's a bigger game going on, and I just need to, you know, and I know how to get in touch with kind of my inner committee, you know, and so that's basically my life credo.
And do I have any, what are your plans for future?
Keep doing what I'm doing, you know, as long as I'm alive and well and can keep doing it. You know, our goals really, and our purpose of this work is to create a world where there are no problems, only projects. Because if you think about that, the only time you think something is a problem is because you think it ought to be better than it is. Something needs to be changed, but you're probably not engaged with making it so yet. But if everybody kind of got, wait a minute, this got my attention, we need to change this. That doesn't make life easy. You don't want life easy. If life was too easy, you'd never challenge yourself or grow or expand or express yourself really. So challenge is a good thing, because you know, you just don't want to be hung up about it. And so building a world where, okay, what's got my attention right now? It might not be fun, but what kind of outcomes, what's my project now about getting through the pandemic? What's my project about working from home right now? What's my project about, you know, getting kids into the right school and getting my relationships with my family at home right now? So all of those are projects, but they may think of them as problems, but the only reason you think of them as a problem is you think they ought to be different. Okay, so what would different look like? And what would you need to do to make it different? So that gets you back in the driver's seat of life. Doesn't make it easy, but it puts you in the driver's seat, as opposed to complaining and being the victim to your life. So just think, if we had a world where there were no problems, only projects, how cool that would be.
Thanks. And okay, we've got a big question. So David, being one of those productive people, I find GTD helpful in actually doing less. Why? because I want to free up as much time as possible to do stuff I love beyond business. What would be your top 3 tips to prioritize actions in various important areas of focus? So you have answered to some extent.
I think so. I mean, you just need to apply this stuff. What's got your attention? Get it all out of your head. Maintain the inventory. And, you know, it also very helpful, as I've identified in the book, Getting Things Done, the 6 different horizons, we actually have commitments. You know, there's kind of the commitments of the actions you need to take, stuff to buy at the store, stuff to talk to people about, et cetera. And then the projects you've got, oh, I need to get tires in my car. I need to handle this. I need to handle that. And then all the areas of focus that generate projects and actions, my health, my vitality, how's my relationships, how's my fun factor. And then you have all the goals you might want to have about any of that. What do I want to have true, you know, 24 months from now or 3 years from now? Then you have the vision. What would my career or lifestyle be like, you know, 5 years from now if things go the way I'd like them? And then you have, why am I on the planet? What's my purpose? What are my core values? What really, really matters to me? And those all have different content if you answered all those questions that I just said. But you can't get rid of them all. They're all there. So sometimes you might need to lift to a higher horizon to notice which things still need to be on your list, which things you might want to move to someday maybe, and which new projects do you want to stick on there? Right? And that just means I need to lift up and sort of kind of manage the forest instead of just hugging the trees. And we all get hugging trees, you know, down in the weeds and dealing with this. I need to let go. The weekly review, or building in a reflection process about some of these higher horizons of commitments you may have will help inform your comfort with what you're deciding to do, and as importantly, what you're deciding not to do.
What's your GTD plan for 2020 regarding books? As I understand, like, what are you going to read? Maybe you have plans, like a list of...
No.
Yeah?
No plans. Usually I get books that my wife is reading and she says, David, you ought to read this. And then I go, okay, I'll take a look. So I'm not a big looking for new stuff to learn or do. You know, when it shows up out there kind of intuitively. Back when you could walk into bookstores, I always like to kind of walk around and wander around and just see what my intuition kind of, where my mind tends to go. And I just kind of trusted that. It's always worked out really well.
Okay, I suppose then the last question. So A, thank you for very much. GTD is amazing. The B, is next question and outcome need to be written next to another?
I didn't understand that.
Is next action and outcome need to be written next to another? So
not really. You know, sometimes there is some software out there where you can organize it either way. Let me see all my phone calls to make, or let me see all the actions I need to do about this project. So that you could cross-reference in kind of a relational database in that way. I've never found that necessary, because the project itself, the outcomes I'm committed to, I really only need to review in my weekly review. I can't do a project. I can only do the actions that it generates. So as long as I'm looking at my project list and then generating the actions, I want to put the action reminders wherever I'm going to see that. You know, I may need to talk to my wife about 3 different projects, but that's all on my Catherine list. If I had to look through all the projects in order to find all the stuff to talk to Catherine about, it's too much work. So I never found the necessity to put them together. It's always nice to know what they're about, but that you wouldn't, if you were doing regular weekly reviews, you wouldn't have that question.
So, and participant also asked, I use Trello. I'm not sure how to connect project and next step. Any tips?
No. I don't know. I don't know Trello.
You don't use Trello, or you don't know?
I don't use Trello. I've worked with some clients who did it. I don't know how they did it. They might be another workaround. Look in the forums online. You know, there are tons of GTD forums or whatever. And Slava, our GTD guy in Kiev, may have an answer to that. So, or he could point you to a resource for it.
Yeah. Okay. So we have been speaking for an hour and a half. I suppose we should end up, because it's like the time to finish. And I'd like to finish this interview on a positive note. And I believe that lockdown could turn out to be like the most creative times for humankind, because, for example, William Shakespeare wrote King Lear during the plague. Isaac Newton formulated the theory of gravity, and so on. So thank you, David, for this amazing time. Thank you for your time. And I wish all of you to be strong, to be positive, and we will overcome all the challenges that we are facing.
Thank you very much. And it was it was a great pleasure to be here. And I loved my trip to Kiev. It was wonderful. And meeting how uplifting the Ukrainian people are. And that was a lot of fun. And I hope I get to come back soon.
Yeah, I hope to meet you in Kiev soon. Yeah, maybe in summer. Or, yeah, thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you all. Bye.